All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, should be to the right of the video. All right. So we'll start here with Dan. He says, "Hey Q, should I work on ball striking before swing speed, or can I work on both simultaneously? Hitting the ball fat again, and I want to get rid of it. Wouldn't it be counterproductive to work on swing speed while working on accuracy and consistency? Thanks." So the answer to the question is neither. You wouldn't work on them simultaneously. You'd work on them separately, right? So I would do some drills for making ball first contact, and then I would just do speed training drills. When you're doing speed training drills, it's not about ball striking, right? It's about getting the speed to go up, right? So, and the cool part is it's very easy to supplement whatever kind of practice that you're doing with speed training because it doesn't take a ton of time to do it because you really can't do a ton of it and really you don't need to unless you're very very well conditioned and you've done a lot of speed training um, and you've kind of worked up to needing to do a lot to continue to make progress with it. But generally, if you look at the 20-minute distance fix, right, that's 3 days a week and it's 20 minutes, right? Each time it's 20 swings and they're a minute apart. So that's 20 minutes. That's about an hour a week that you would be, practicing speed training, right? Now, if you, here's what I would say to what you're saying as well. If you don't have a lot of time to practice and you're chunking the ball a lot, yeah, I would be working on that and not speed training. I would prioritize, hitting the ball, you know, solidly over speed training because it's not going to do you that much good to swing faster and still chunk it, right? But yeah, I mean, if you're practicing, if you're able to practice 4 hours a week, right? Uh, then it'd be very easy to supplement some speed training in there and also get plenty of practice in working on getting rid of the fat shots. Outside of the ball then turf masterclass, which is just a course that takes you through some drills. It's more of an organized thing to get you, where you want to be with the fat shots. That's one thing I would recommend. The other thing I recommend, I have a video that I will post in the chat here. Let me get to it. Bear with me here. All right. So I go through several drills that you can do to get rid of those fat shots. So I'm going to post that in the chat. There we go. So you follow that link. Basically, I'll run through each thing that I typically see. Look at that. Yeah, that's a pickleball. I don't know if we got any pickleballers out there, but I started playing last year. I hooked on it. But anyway, first thing is ball position. Typically, for pushing the ball position too far forward makes it difficult. Real quickly, middle to just forward to the middle of the stance for about any ball that we're hitting off the turf, that we're hitting directly off the ground, is going to be a good spot. Obviously, like a specialty shot where you're trying to drive it in really low, you might put it in more back in your stance. If you're trying to bring it in really, really high, you can put it a little bit more forward, but you got to be careful not putting it too far forward because then it's going to make it more difficult to make ball then turf contact or ball and turf contact at the same time. Which leads me to, I probably should have talked about what we actually need to do. What I think is really important to understand is how the club needs to work down to the ball. Because if you understand like the geometry of what's going on there, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm trying to find my screen. There we go. It makes it a lot easier. So I like to use a hula hoop to illustrate this, right? So let's say that we're hitting the ball that way, right? The club comes on an arc that is, you can see with this hula hoop, right? Imagine the club is leaving like a speed trail, right? And it's working down, it reaches the bottom, and then works back up, right? where the bottom of this arc needs to be, it needs to be in front of the ball on the target side and a little bit below the ball. So it needs to be like that, right? If you look at the best players, it's typically, they've measured this, it's typically going to be about 3 or 4 inches in front of the ball. It's typically where that's happening. So if we understand that, it makes this a little bit easier, because everything that you're doing is to get the bottom of this swing to be where it needs to be. And there's several things that we do that changes where the bottom of that swing is relative to the ball. One of them is ball position, right? If I push the ball position really far forward, if I play the ball position up here, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to get the bottom of that swing arc to be up here. I'm going to have to I would have to come over the top. It would be the most likely scenario. And that's a lot of times what we see when people put the ball position too far forward. They tend to come over the top, so that way they can actually make contact with the ball. Because if they were to shallow out the club and get the club to come down on a neutral arc down to the ball, it would lead to a chunk shot, right? So a lot of times to get rid of the chunk shot, we start coming over the top, and now we have a different problem, right? So we don't want to push that ball position too far forward. If I'm trying to hit a higher shot, what I'm going to do, I'm going to play the ball a little bit more forward. So generally I'm middle to a ball forward to the middle. I might play it another ball forward. Again, I don't want to get too far forward. I might play it a ball forward. I'm also going to, let the club release a little bit more. I'm going to stand a little bit taller as I come through contact, so that way that club can release. Because shaft lean is something that is a primary influence on the launch angle of the ball, right? And ultimately how high the ball is going to go. So if I come in and I have a ton, maybe I play the ball forward, but I have a ton of shaft lean, that ball's still going to come out low. So I'm going to stand a lot taller and let the club release a little bit more. I also may swing with a little bit more speed, more aggressively, because the more speed you have, the more energy you can give the ball. The more energy the ball has, the more it can keep climbing up in the air, right? So those would be some things that I would do if you really need to hit the ball high. You need to use loft. You need to use, obviously, if you use too much loft, the ball won't go very far. So that's why you may need to give it a little extra oomph or a little bit more speed, right? But that also brings in, it can make it a little bit more difficult to hit the ball solidly. So a lot of times the lie, I would only really do that if I had a really good lie, where I had a little more margin for error. If I had a tight lie, it'd be difficult to, do that. All right. So ball position's one. Another one is how our hips are moving in the backswing, right? So a lot of times what I'll see, if you draw a line on the outside of the hip, so let's say you're using a swing analysis app like OnForm, that's what we use for the online lessons. When you sign up for the online lessons for an instructor here at Tuscany Golf, if you draw a line on the outside of the hip, typically what you're going to see when you look at the best players, you'll see they'll move into that line slightly to start the backswing, and then the hip will start going back and around. It will remain on that line. And then as they get up to the top of the swing, they'll actually push away from that line and toward the target, right? So when I look at people that struggle with chunk shots, a lot of times what I see is their hips will go into that line, and then they'll continue to go across that line. And a lot of times they'll be across that line at the top of the swing. The reason why this is important is that if we're way over here, right, at the top of the swing, and I need to get way over there to get the low point of my swing in front, that's a long ways to go. And a lot of people just don't make it, right? So there's a drill that I show you in that video I just put in the chat, where we put a chair on the outside of the hip. We're going to bump the chair to start the backswing. We're going to touch the chair as we continue the backswing. The last part of the backswing, we're going to separate from the chair, right? That's going to get your hips in a position that allows you to more easily get the bottom of your swing to be in front. So that's the second thing that I look at. The third thing I look at is, do we have our momentum moving in the direction of the target, as we're getting up to the top and the start of the downswing, right? A lot of times people, maybe they're not, sliding their hips. Maybe they're in a great position, but then they still swing from their back foot. They're not transferring their weight, right? So a great drill for that is the step drill. I show you how a good progression to go through with the step drill. Real quickly with the step drill, you just start with your feet together. You're not hitting a ball here initially. You start with your feet together. You throw the club back. As you throw the club back, you step forward, right? So this forces you to get your momentum going forward. I go through a good progression of how to do that in that video that I just posted. Another one is swinging too much from the inside. If we over shallow out the club, I'm seeing this a little bit more now, especially with our members of the website, because we do emphasize shallowing out the club because it's very important. But you can also do too much of a good thing, right? It's like, if you had a headache and you want to get rid of your headache, you might take 2 Tylenol and that'll get rid of your headache, right? Well, if you, that'd be a great thing, right? But if you took the entire bottle of Tylenol, that's not going to be good. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm guessing it's not going to be good. It's going to get rid of your headache, but you're going to have more other problems, right? You're probably going to have a bad stomach ache. Might even be fatal. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on that, but I know taking an entire bottle of Tylenol probably wouldn't be good, right? So same kind of thing. We want to shallow out the club. We want to get that club going down in a nice arc down the ball. But if we get it too shallow, too far behind us, the club path is going to tend to get too much into out. And when the club path gets too much into out, you're going to tend to hit the ground sooner. So a great way to visualize this is to imagine I'm standing at home plate. The pitcher is right in front of me over here, right? If I'm standing at home plate and I swing in the direction of first base, in that direction, my club, the bottom, just kind of swing the club like that in that direction. And you can see where the bottom of your club is happening, right? You can see it's probably happening about right there, right? Well, that's more toward my trail foot, right? If my bottom of my swing is before the ball, that means I got to hit up on the ball. And if I got to hit on the ball, I'm going to chunk it or I'm going to top it. I'm either going to hit the ground, I'm going to chunk it, or I'm going to miss the ground, I'm going to top it or thin it, best case scenario. So we don't want to shallow out the club too much. So if you're in that kind of situation, you may want to feel like you're having a little bit of a pull feel to get that club path a little bit more on track. One of the last pieces I look at is the release. And for those of you who've been on the office hours and hear me talk about fixing chunk shots, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but you probably heard this spiel before. A lot of you, I'm sure, are listening to this and saying, "Oh, release, that's the problem. That's what I got to get rid of." But it's really the last thing you want to look at, because all these other things, if you do all these other things that I talked about leading into this, more than likely that's going to fix it. And those things that I talked about are much easier to fix. And a lot of times you can go to the range and get pretty quick results doing that. Now, it may take some time to make it second nature, but you can get some pretty quick results doing that. With the release, you're not going to, if you're an early releaser of the club, right, you're not going to go to the range and start releasing it out in front in one range session. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. That's something that you're going to have to train into your swing. And it's more of a long-term kind of goal, right? So just to talk about the release and how that can cause chunk shots, if I'm coming in like this, and just imagine I just stop and I release the club. Well, I'm going to hit the ground back there. Now, if I'm here, and let's say that I release it really, really late, right? Well, now I can hit the ground way up here if I want, right? So it does have an effect on the low point, but I don't want you to look at that and say, man, I got to work on my release to get rid of my chunk shots. The reality is that you need to work on the other things to get rid of your chunk shots. And the release is kind of the last thing. It's more of a long-term thing that you would work on. And that would be, you would work on that by going through the Tospigol system, and the 20-minute shallowing fix would be a part of it as well to help you to get that club releasing a little bit better. All right. So Tony C says, I just started ball, then turf masterclass. I normally don't take a divot when golfing. I'm not swinging successfully when trying to take a divot. Is this class not for me? I'm not swinging successfully when trying to take a divot. Yeah, because it helps you to learn what you need to do to take a divot and hit the ball solidly. The other thing is that I've talked about this in past office hours. I wouldn't get too obsessed with the divots. Get obsessed with the contact, right? That's really what it comes down to, is making good contact, right? So if you are making ball first contact and it's in the middle of the face, if you don't take a divot when you do that, then that's fine, because there's conditions where you're not always going to take a divot. There's lies where you won't take a divot, and there's lies where you'll be more likely to take a divot, right? So lies where you're going to be much more likely to take a divot are going to be soft, tight, wet lies, right? Where the ball is kind of sitting on a tight lie. The reason is that, if the ball's not sitting up on the grass, you're going to have to kind of get into the grass to be able to get that strike in the middle of the face. And also, if the ground is soft and wet, it doesn't provide as much resistance, and that's going to create more of a divot. Now, if you're playing in conditions that are very firm, dry, hard, right, and also if there's more grass there and the ball's kind of sitting up, this is going to be less likely to take a divot, because if the ground's really firm, it's going to be less likely to dig into the ground. And then also, if the ball's sitting up on the grass, I'm sure we've had these lies where we go out there and the ball is sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee. Well, there's a little bit of airiness underneath that ball that you can actually swing the club through and not get into the ground. And you're basically just kind of brushing that top layer of grass off, right? Or you're brushing the grass out. You're not really taking a divot necessarily. You may not even be getting into the ground. And that is because the ball is sitting up, right? Think about it this way. When you hit a driver off a tee, do you take a divot? Of course not, right? Because the ball is up on a tee. It has that. So sometimes the grass kind of acts as a tee, and you're not necessarily taking a divot there, right? So same kind of thing there. Also, the club that you're using may be more or less conducive to taking a divot. So wedges you're going to be much more likely to take a divot with one of those than like a fairway wood, right? The reason being is that wedges are much higher lofted clubs, so they're going to have a sharper leading edge right here, right? That sharper leading edge is going to tend to be more conducive to digging into the ground, right? Also, the contact, when you make contact with the ball, it actually will drive the club down toward the ground, right? Because of the collision, right? It's going to deflect down into the ground because there's more loft here. Now, if you have a fairway wood, let's say you got a 3-wood, the shape of a 3-wood is more rounded on the bottom. It has a much, more rounded. So one, the sole is more rounded, and then also the leading edge is more rounded. That's going to be less conducive to digging. And then also it doesn't have as much loft. So when it deflects, it doesn't deflect downward very much. It kind of deflects just back away. Imagine if you had zero loft, right? It's like a car collision, right? Car hitting a wall. It's just going to go backwards, right? If you're coming in like this, the club's going to deflect downward. So that's going to create more of a divot. So don't get too obsessed with the divots. Get more obsessed with where you're hitting the ball on the face, right? And if you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face, you're making ball first contact, and that creates a divot, then great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. That's okay. That's not a divot. Is not a it's not necessarily a characteristic of a great shot. What a characteristic of a great shot is making clean contact with the ball. And sometimes you will need to take a divot in order to make that happen, and sometimes you won't. It just depends on the conditions, the lie, the club you're using. There's lots of factors that go into it. But if you're struggling with making ball first contact, you are exactly you are exactly who the course is for. So yes, I would recommend it if you are in that kind of situation where you're having trouble making ball first contact or clean contact in general. All right, let's keep going here. So Chuck M says, what does it mean to turn the corner in a golf swing, and are you supposed to do it? It would really depend on the context. I would ask the person that said that, because that could mean a lot of different things. When I say turn the corner in the golf swing, a lot of times I'm referring to the hands, because basically my hands are going to work out to the left, out to the right. They're going to turn the corner, then they're going to turn to the left, and that club should be following that. So that's what I would call it, but it really just depends on the context in which whoever was talking that about. So here would be my advice. If you're ever listening to an instructor, or you're getting a lesson or something like that, ask them point blank right there. Oh, what does that mean to turn the corner, right? What exactly are you talking about? I wouldn't save it, to ask somebody else or whatever, because I don't know the context in which they were talking about that. It may or may not mean what I just talked about because I don't know the context in which it was talking about. If I knew the context, it'd be one thing, but I don't know the context. So, in turn the corner in the golf swing, it could be in the context of the golf swing, but that's still vague. It could mean there's lots of places in the golf swing where you could talk about turning the corner, but usually that's the most prominent one when the hands are kind of turned in the corner. So Graham C says, "Hi Q, I have a question about the trail hand index finger. Could you clarify the position of the club against the inside of the index finger? Does the inside knuckle help to control the club on downswing and through impact? I would appreciate if you could go through the role of the inside knuckle for me. Thanks." I think you're overthinking it a little bit. Really, really overthinking it. I would just have your hand on the grip that's in a comfortable position. If you look at the best players in the world, if you look at their grips, a lot of them have very, very different things going on. They'll have things going on differently with their index finger. So there isn't like one role, like this is what the index finger does. This is what you have to do with your index finger. If you don't do this with your index finger, you're going to suck. It's not going to work that way. I would put your index finger in a position that feels the most comfortable for you and but feels like gives you the results that you want, right? So some players you'll see, I'll see they'll put their index finger more down on the shaft like this, right? I don't do that. That doesn't feel comfortable for me. And I don't feel like it's doing anything when I put it there. So I put mine pretty much close to it, right? Like that. I see some people spread it out. And if they spread it out and that's what feels best for them, that's what's most comfortable for them. And that's what gives them the best results. Who am I to tell them that that's a bad place to put it, right? But anyway, I like to have it right there. Really, my feel is not just in the knuckle there. It's about these fingers in general, right? That's the feel that I'm going for. So if I'm handing somebody a pen, that's the kind of feel that I'm having there, right? If I'm cracking a whip, it's the same kind of thing, right? You're putting pressure right there to give you a feel for pressing that club down. That's really what the roll is. So put your finger in a position that allows you to do that. Don't overthink, oh, my finger has to be here. And then, because I think that's a big problem with golf instruction is that I think that some instructors, they lean into their preferences as requirements, right, to play good golf. And it's not the reality because if you look at the best golfers in the world, it speaks for itself. There's a lot of different things going on. These golf swings are very different. Sky Schleifer's swings way different than John Rahm's and Brooks Koepka and Wyndham Clark. All these swings are very different, right? They do things that are very different and things that work really well for them. And that's really what you have to find. If there was an instructor that said you have to have your finger like this, where it's spread down a little bit, because I do see people do that. You have to have your finger like that if you want to play good golf. I don't buy into that. I think you can play golf. It's really specific to the person. So that's the way I would go about it. It's not, don't overthink it. Put your finger in a comfortable place that gives you the best feel for where that, where you should be having that club come down. That's what I would recommend doing. So WWCA says struggling with irons going right and curving right-hander, although driver going fairly straight. I can't seem to get the face closed on irons. I returned back to square one with 20-minute shallow fix. Can't seem to get it. Any tips? Yeah, I would work through that 20-minute shallow fix drill number 1 to get that ball hooking. Really exaggerate it. Get the ball hooking. Just don't get the ball going straight. Get it hooking and then tone it down, right? So there's really 2 ways you can really do that. One would be to strengthen the grip. Use a really strong grip if you have to. Get that lead hand on top. Get that trail hand under, right? That's going to help you to get that club face closed. I mean, get in a position where the setup where you feel like I'm going to hook the snot out of this. that's the kind of position that I would try to get into. And then once you're able to do that, then you can just tone it down. The other way is with wrist angles. So if you're getting up to the top and you're cupping your wrist a ton, look here. If I cup my wrist a lot, even if I have a very strong grip, if I cut my wrist too much, it will open up the face, right? So I would get your wrist angles in a position that allow you to, get that club face more square. So you may want to feel, you don't necessarily have to bow your wrist. If you have a strong enough grip, you definitely don't have to bow your wrist, but you may want to move your wrist toward bowing, right? So if your wrist is like this, moving it toward bowing might mean just having it right there. Well, it's still slightly cupped, but the face is more closed, right? And if you have a strong enough grip, this can totally work. You can have a little bit of cupping in your wrist if you have a strong enough grip. So it's really as simple as strong grip and or stronger wrist angles. The only other thing I would look at for is just to make sure you're not getting too far out in front of it, right? So if your whole body's kind of sliding in front of it, you're going to have less time to get that club face closed. Whereas if you're, now we don't necessarily want to hang back, but if you imagine if I were to hang back on my back foot, it'd be much easier to get my club face closed, right? So you might, if you're see yourself and you're really sliding in front of it, then that could be part of the reason why you're having trouble getting the club face closed. Set up with the club face closed. Who cares? It's okay. You don't have to set up. There's no rule that says you have to set up with the face dead square to the ball. You can set it up to it like this, right? And come into it like that, right? I mean, you can set up to it like you're getting ready to chop it like an axe and try to hit it with the middle of the face. There's no rule that says that you have to do that. It's unconventional. But hey, if you absolutely flush your shots setting up like that, again, it goes back to what I was saying before. Who am I to tell you that that's wrong? If you're absolutely flushing the ball, that's all I care about. If you're doing it in unconventional way, that's cool to me. I love seeing different ways of doing it. I love it. I love the different swings. I love that not everyone is a cookie cutter kind of way, because I think that's good, because that means that everyone can have their own kind of things going on, right? I don't have a swing that looks like Adam Scott. If I my favorite golf swing is probably Adam Scott's up there for sure. I mean, there's just nothing about it that I could just say. I just can't say anything bad about it, right? I can't say anything that's wrong with it. Everything's just kind of in the right place, right? My swing doesn't look like that, and that's okay. It doesn't have to look like that, and that's really what kind of top speed golf is all about. Top speed golf is all about, okay, look at, Clay's looked at, and I've looked at as well, all these the best players in the world, and here are the things that we see that all of them do, that they all really have in common. Everything else is just, it's just your own kind of swing signature, right? So if you look at Scottie Scheffler, you look at Adam Scott, you look at Tiger, you look at all these players, right? They're all doing the top speed. They're all doing what we're talking about. They're the most important things, but they all have very different things that they're also doing as well. Scottie Scheffler with his footwork, and things like that. So you have to, kind of look at it that way. Do your best to do the main things, and then everything else is just little tweaks to get the results that you need. Right. So that's the way I would go about it. But yeah, if you're struggling with getting the club face closed enough, strengthen that grip, get that grip stronger, get those wrist angles stronger. These are kind of the tweaks that we're talking about to get the ball flight and everything that what you need to have happen. Right. So that's what I would recommend doing. Outside of that, you can sign up for the online lessons. There could be something specific going on with your swing that, obviously I can't see if I don't see, I don't know if I don't see your swing. So if you want to sign up for the online lessons, we do have that. Let me see if anybody's got any spots open. I think I might have some spots open. Yeah, so I got some spots open. So if you're interested, you can click the link above the video, and I can take a look at your swing and tell you, give you some ideas on what you need to do. But outside of that, simply strengthen the grip. Because here's the thing too, just in working with some people in person at the clinics, I mostly work with people online. So I don't always I do run into this online as well. But in person, I run into this a lot where I'll tell, somebody will have the same issue that you're having, right? Where they're leaving the face open, the ball's going off to the right. And I'll say, okay, we'll strengthen the grip. Well, they'll strengthen their grip. And I mean, they'll go from a weak grip to a little less weak grip. And it's like, no, let's get that grip strong, right? So what I'm talking about is they'll go from this to that. To them, it feels wildly different, but it really isn't that much different. It's not really going to help them get the club face more close. So what I would say is get out of your comfort zone, really exaggerate getting that strong, get that lead hand on top, get that trail hand under. Now this, I mean, I feel like if I made a swing doing this, I would hook the snot out of this ball, right? Because the grip is so strong. Get the grip so strong that happens. And then once you get that, then you just tone it down. If you do that, keep it really, really simple. That's something you could go out in a range session and get corrected pretty quickly. All right, so Keith E says, discuss the essentials for the 50, 30, and 10-yard pitch ship for mid-handicap players. Yeah, so basically what I like to see is the feet closer together on these. Typically when I see people struggle with these shots, a lot of times they're taking like their normal stance. So take a narrower stance. The reason why you would take a narrower stance is because it makes it much easier to control the bottom of your swing, right? When we have a wider stance, it's going to promote more of a weight shift. And we want that if we want power, but we don't need power for this kind of shot, right? We need some finesse, right? We need control. So having the feet a little closer together. So for like a 10-yard shot, I would have my feet this close together. For a 50-yard, I would probably be about this far apart, right? I do it based on feel for me because the bigger the swing is, the wider the stance needs to be because you need some stability, right? So that's why with a 10-yard, if I'm hitting a 10-yard pitch shot, that swing is only going to be about that, if anything, right? I don't need a ton of stability for that. But if I'm hitting a 50-yard shot, that's going to be more kind of up in here, right? I need a little bit more stability for that. So I get a little bit wider, but I'm still much narrower. I'm still inside my shoulders for the most part. So that's the first piece. The second piece, I also like to set up with my feet a little bit open because it helps me to get through the shot. Now, if you're super flexible and you can turn your hips through very easily, then you may not need to do that. But for me, I'm not a super flexible person, especially in my hips. I need a little bit of help to get through that. So I'll set up with my stance open, and then even with my lead foot a little bit open, making it easier to kind of turn through. All right. And then the other piece would be like ball position. A lot of it depends on the trajectory. So, you can practice these trajectories, but if I'm trying to drive it in low, I'm going to put it more off the inside of my foot here, right? I'd have my weight forward. I'd keep it forward. I'd have the hands forward, and I would just kind of drive it forward like that. And when I release, right, the club would stay below my hands, right? So if I was trying to drive it in a really low 50-yarder, right, it would kind of be, ball position would be more off the inside of my foot. And I'd have my hands forward, weight forward. And then when I would finish, right, I would kind of finish like that to drive it in low. The club head would not release out in front. If I'm going for middle trajectory, right, I'm going to play the ball a little less back, probably more in the middle, maybe just a hair back of middle. And then, again, my hands aren't going to be as far forward, and my weight's going to be forward. But when I release it, it's just going to be in front of my hands. So a 50-yarder from, a 50-yarder middle trajectory might look like this. Right, so see how the club is staying in front of my hands, right? Now, if I want to hit it high, I'll play it a little bit more forward, right? Might be middle to just a hair forward to middle. I would stand a little taller to let the club release a little bit more. And when I finish, I would finish with the club more upright and past my hands. So that way the club's releasing a little bit more and it's going higher. So that'd be kind of the movement in the release. Another big issue that I see with golfers with these kind of shots, they do it very wristy. So they'll bring it back and they'll really hinge the wrist and everything. I try to just have soft wrists and try to take the wrist out as much and have it be more arm and body swing, right? More arm and body swing. So what that might look like is more something like this, right? As opposed to like this, where I'm really bending my arms and bending my wrists. I don't want to bend my limbs that much, right? I want to feel my arms swing with my body. It's like if I was going to take this ball and I was going to toss it to the green, I wouldn't bring it back and bend my arm like this and really bend my wrist back and flip my wrist through. But that's the way a lot of people hit these shots. I would just swing my arm back. My wrist may bend back a little bit, and then I would just kind of throw it, right? It would just be like that. That's the same kind of motion that you want to have with these shots, right? So it's the same kind of thing. I just want to imagine like I'm just bringing it back and tossing it there. And you can even do that. You can even, when you're practicing, just kind of feel, okay, if I'm trying to hit this shot, you could actually take a ball, right? You take a ball and you can just toss it, right? Toss it and then replicate that same feeling with the swing. Then I'm just tossing it there. And that's the same kind of tempo and everything that you want to have too. I find a lot of people they're way too quick, or they'll bring it back too much and then they'll decelerate through, right? So if you just kind of throw a ball, right, and kind of have some nice rhythm and tempo, because that's really what you're doing, right? We're throwing this club head into the ball, right? That's what we're doing with our arms. So we just kind of have that same feeling here. We can replicate that in a little pitch shot, and you'll be much, much better for it. So that's what I would recommend doing. That's basically the standard kind of pitch technique for there. The only time I would have a lot of wrist hinge and stuff like that would be if I had a really bad lie and I needed to steepen or have a more downward angle of attack on the ball, right? Because if I bring this club back and I don't bend my arm a ton or bend my wrist back a ton, well, this club is going to be coming back kind of wide and it's becoming in a little bit more even with the turf, right? Meaning that my angle of attack is more level, right? Still down. I still want it to be down, but it's going to be down like a few degrees, right? Whereas if I'm trying to hit a shot that I have a really bad lie, I'm not going to be able to hit that kind of shot because the grass is probably going to be in the way, right? So if I had a deep rough, I play that ball off my back foot and I would pick up the club more, right? I have more bend in my right arm and my right wrist, and then I would kind of drop that down to try to get some cleaner contact with the ball, and hopefully the ball will pop out, right? So that'd be a situation there. But for a standard, like good lie in the fairway, I like a nice wide, feeling like that club head kind of goes wide, and we're just kind of tossing the ball. That's if you look at most of the best pitchers of the ball, like a Tiger, like a Jason Day, Steve Stricker, Luke Donald, you look at those types of players, that's what you're going to see. You're not going to see tons of bending on the arm. You're going to see the body kind of turning back and through, kind of like that. Cam Smith is another one. He's a really good pitcher of the ball, does the same kind of thing. All right, so Mike says, still struggle with an outside in swing, getting better contact and speed. I've done 20-minute sessions and other courses. What course would you recommend to work getting to the inside? 20-minute shallowing fix, you do it until you get it done. That's really as simple as it gets. It's not, I wouldn't recommend jumping from one course to another, because if you do the 20-minute shallowing fix and you do it correctly, you will have it done, right? And if it comes back, you just need to go through it again, right? If you are getting the ball to start to the right and hook to the left back toward the target, then you're getting the club to swing from the inside, right? So that's not saying this is what you did, Mike, but I get this a lot of time where I'll have somebody sign up for the lessons and I'll ask them, oh, have you done any of the Totsby Golf system? And they'll say, yeah, I've done the stable fluid spine, I've done the power turn, and I'll look at their swing and they're not doing those things. It's like, well, you may have done the drills, but you actually didn't you must have not used feedback or misunderstood or went back to the old ways or whatever it is, because you're not doing, you're not doing it right. So, a course is one thing. You can work through a course, but if you're not actually doing it, it's not doing you any good, right? So work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. If you're having trouble shallowing out the club, you work through the 20-minute shallowing fix and you work through it till you get it done, right? It's not, try this course. No, that's the course that you work through. That's the 20-minute shallowing fix. It's a very simple, easy to work through course. Use feedback mechanisms, right? Use video, use your ball flight. A lot of times I feel like people are cheating it a little bit if they're because for example, if this is my target line, right? Meaning that if you were to extend the stick all the way out, it would go through the target, right? I've seen people do this where they'll work on the 20-minute shot fix. They'll get the ball hooking, but in order to get to the start to the right and hook, they just tilt their body this way. Well, this is not shallowing out the club. You're just coming over the top still. You're just aiming way to the right and hooking it, right? So you need to get to where your body is parallel. Your toes are parallel to that target line, right? And you're getting this ball to start to the right and curve to the left, right? Put a box in the way to force you to do that, right? Clay uses an impact bag. So if this is my target line, if I come over the top outside that stick, I'm going to whack that box. So I got to make swings where I come in and I miss that box and I hit the ball, right? So work through that and you'll get there. I don't have another course for you to work on or anything like that. It's just that course. Get the face closed, so that way you're incentivized to swing to the right or swing inside out to shallow out the club. That's what drill number 1 is. Once you get 10 in a row where you get it hooking, doesn't matter where it starts in drill 1. It just matters that it's hooking, right? If it's hooking, then we're actually incentivized to swing the club from the inside. Now, let me go over what that means because a lot of people don't understand that. So what that means is if I have this face open, and now I still have this face open and I work on swinging the club from the inside, well, my ball is just going to go even farther away from the target, right? Because if the face is open, I'm only really incentivized to come over the top and steep because that gets the club face pointing more in the direction of the target, right? So if I have this face open and I swing more to the left, well, that gets my club face more pointing toward the target. That's why a lot of people do it. That's why it's drill number 1. If I have this club face open, but then I swing it from the inside, well, my ball is going to start from the right to the right, and then it's going to continue to go to the right because my face is still open. So your ball is going to start away from the target, and it's going to continue to move away from the target. We got to get the ball, we got to get the face closed, so that way we're actually incentivized to swing to the right to shallow out the club. That's drill number 1. Make sure you get the 10 in a row, and don't just breeze your way through it and say, oh, I got 5 in a row. That's good enough. I'm going to go. No, you got to get 10 in a row. The reason why you got to get 10 in a row is that means if you get 10 in a row, that means that you're good enough at it to move on to the next step. If you don't get 10 in a row, you're not good enough at it yet. You need to keep working there and before that, because that might be part of the problem, right? Where you might be breezing through it a little bit. Not saying that you are. I'm just saying that that's just something that I see quite often. And then when you get to the second drill, right, the ball now has to start to the right and curve to the left, right? So if it's starting to the left and curving to the left, that does not count. If it starts straight and curves to the left, that doesn't count. It has to start to the right and curve to the left. That means that you're getting the club to work from the inside, and you have to be able to do it with your body parallel to the target line. You can't turn your body this way and cheat it, right? That's just doing the same thing, just coming over the top with a closed face. So that's not actually helping you to shallow out the club. So you need to put the alignment stick down, point it at a target, keep your feet parallel to it, get the ball to start to the right and curve to the left. Now, if you're unable to do that, slow down. Do it in a shorter swing. Get to where you can do that, and then work it up to a longer swing, right? You may need to go a little bit slower, right? There's all kinds of things. I would make sure to use a feedback mechanism. Put the box there. A lot of people don't want to put it there because it's uncomfortable, but you got to put something. You have to use feedback. That's one of the most important things to change something is you got to use feedback. If you don't use feedback, you have no idea whether you're doing something correctly or not. So do that. And then the last drill, once you get to where you can get 10 in a row that start to the right and curve to the left, that means that you're good at it. You've gotten good at it. Now you can go to the last drill where you dial it in, right? I think people working through these drills sometimes are afraid to hit the big hook shots because they feel like, well, I don't want that to be my swing. Well, it's not going to be your swing, right? We're overdoing something, so that way we can tone it down. When you get to drill number 3, once you've gotten those hooks, the start to the right and curve to the left. Once you've got that, then you can go drill number 3 and you can dial it in to whatever ball flight you want. If you want a little baby draw, if you want a little baby fade, if you want to hit it pretty much dead straight, you can Clay walks you through how to dial it in that. So that's what I recommend doing. I wish there was another thing you can do, but that's it. You just gotta go work through that 20-minute shallowing fix and get it right. Billy W says, how do I determine the top of my backswing? So I would just make sure you're getting a good full turn, right? So we're gonna make sure that we're getting a nice, at least 90-degree turn, and that we're not over bending the arms, and that we have a good spine angle, right? That's really what it comes down to. So if we're turning our hips, turning our shoulders, we're getting those shoulders turning 90 degrees. We're not leaning the spine toward the target, and we're not over bending that trail arm. We keep that trail arm at least 90 degrees. If we're doing that, I would say that that's the top of your backswing, right? If we're not turning, right, we need to turn more. We need to maybe work through the power turn course in the Toss Miguel system. If we're going up to the top, we're turning, but then we're going like this to try to create more to lengthen the swing. That's not the way we want to lengthen the swing, because that's going to put you in a bad position. You're going to tend to come over the top in the downswing. So making sure that you have a good spine angle away from the target, that's the Toss Miguel system. And then we don't really talk about this a lot in the Toss Miguel system or anywhere for the most part. But generally, if you look at the best players in the world, you're not going to see any of them that have an arm structure where their trail arm is bent more or less than 90 degrees at the top of the swing. The reason is that when our arm is bent like that, think about it this way. If I was to throw a ball, right? I've never seen a Major League Baseball pitcher throw a ball with their arm bent like this. None of them do that. They all have their arm about a 90 degree or so angle. That's the same thing we want to do in the golf swing, because it's the most powerful way to move your arm, and it also allows you to move your arm. Because when your arm is really bent, you're going to tend to want to internally rotate from your shoulder here, right? And if we do that right away in the start of the downswing, what's going to happen? I'm going to tend to come over the top. I want to have this wider angle here. It makes it easier to get that elbow in front of me in the downswing. So I'd say that's where you determine the top of the swing. Good turn of the body. So we're turning our hips, turning our shoulders. Our body is tilted away from the target a little bit. And then our arm structure, I'm okay with a little bend in the lead arm. I'm totally cool with that. Let's give it straight or a little bit of bend. But I don't want to see this excessively bent, because then we're going to tend to do that. Right? So a good top of the backswing. And it's going to be different for everybody, because everybody's flexibility is different. Right? So for me, this is what it looks like for me. That's the top of my swing. Right? And I know some people might look at that and be like, well, you're not even close to parallel. Well, yeah, in order for me to get to parallel, I would have to do a lot of the things. That's why you have to be very careful listening to absolutes in golf, right? Look at what the best players are doing. Most of them are not getting to parallel, with the club. Some of them are. If they're more flexible, they are. But most recreational golfers are not going to get to parallel because most of us just don't have the flexibility, right? So for me, that looks like that. If I wanted to get to parallel, I would have to, one, lose my spine angle. I'd have to really bend my arms too much, right? I'd have to put myself in a bad spot to get there, right? So for me, with an iron, that's there. Now with momentum, it may look like it gets to pretty close to parallel, but that's what mine looks like. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. So, but that's what I would look out for to get to the top of your swing. So Charles H says, I want to personally thank you for what you do. My handicap has gone down 7 points in the last 3 months on your office hours advice. How can I obtain a cap? First of all, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad to hear that it's helped you. Wow, that's awesome to have your handicap go down so much. That's great to hear. It sounds like you're on the right track with things. As far as obtaining a cap, we don't sell them. It's something we've looked into, but it's just not a priority right now. It might be something we do in the future. Really, the caps that we have, they're just made for us in house. They're just for the employees and stuff.